Hi, I'm Rob Cosman. Welcome to my shop. We decided to do this video on the best chisels for woodworking with a budget in mind. We're only going to compare two, approximately the same price. One is the tang, one is the socket. If you want the details, stay with us. I'm Rob Cosman and welcome to my shop. We make it our job to help take your woodworking to the next level. If you're new to our channel, make sure you subscribe and hit the notification bell, which will alert you whenever we release a new video. Anytime we use a new tool or technique, we'll leave a description down below so that make it easier for you to find. All right, let's get back to work. I think next to a workbench, chisels are probably the most important tool. In fact, it doesn't matter what you do with wood, whether you're framing homes, finishing cabinets, or building furniture, you have to have chisels. And I've always felt that how it feels in your hand is probably the single deciding factor on whether or not you're going to use it. Of course, it has to be able to hold an edge, has to have the proper shape, and I'll tell you a little more about that as we get into it. But it's ergonomically, it's got to feel good, or else you just won't want to pick it up. Why do we choose just two? Well, they're approximately the same price as I mentioned. So rather than get out a whole bunch of them, we can focus on these two, and we're going to go take it from the unboxing right through to finishing the back, seeing how flat they come out of the box, and then trying them in both hardwood and softwood to see will they hold an edge. All right, let's start with the Narex. This is a new chisel for them. The steel on the blade is chromium vanadium steel. The width is 3/8 of an inch or 10 millimeters, and they've also cryogenically treated it. Let's see what else we got here. It's in sizes. Comes in 1/8, quarter, obviously 3/8, half, 3/4, 1 inch, an inch and a half. It's long. In fact, it's quite a bit longer than the other chisel, or most chisels, and it has a tang as opposed to a socket. So that's what the package looks like. They're made, by the way, in the Czech Republic. So let's open it up and see what we got. It comes packaged, sealed in a, that's a resealable bag. Not that I don't think you'd be using that. And I would imagine that that is that special paper that protects steel from corrosion, although I don't know that for sure. Has a tip protector on the end. So, first impressions. The handle, I believe, is made out of ash. It is. And it's quite long. In fact, if you were to compare it to a Lie-Nielsen chisel, you can see how long that is. It has a leather washer, which is a bit of a shock absorber. It has a collar right here, which helps prevent splitting. So by a tang, meaning part of this goes up into the handle. It's nicely finished. It's actually really nicely finished, very smooth. Now the blade. So it's a little bit on the thin side, especially as you get near the end. It does have the bevels on the right side, and a lot of chisels you find, this is called a beveled edge, and the purpose of that beveling on the edge is so that when you're cutting dovetails, you can get in between the two tails, reach into that corner without hitting the side. A lot of chisels have morphed over the years to where they've taken that bevel and put it up on the top. This is on the side like it's supposed to be, and it runs from the tip right up to here. So as you continuously use the chisel and grind it over the years, that's not going to change on you. That's a plus. It also has a little bit of a landing right here. If that bevel comes right to the back, that's a knife edge and you're going to cut yourself on it. And some chisels actually come that way. It's got a little bit of a flat landing right there just to protect you, which is another plus. It comes with a 25-degree primary bevel. Now the back. The back has been somewhat polished, and this is always a concern because they don't polish that the way I would polish it. They probably do it on a buffing wheel, which means you can see that the corners are somewhat rounded over. So in order to get this to be in working condition, you've got to remove enough material off the back so that you get rid of that radius. That way, right out here in the corner, these sharp corners actually work effectively. So that's going to make us work a little extra more so than we would have to otherwise. I also don't like the fact that the back comes up like this. And you'll see when we start to flatten it that you run the risk of hitting this raised area right here on the edge of your stone, which then elevates your chisel. Sometimes you don't even realize it, and now you're taking off or taking away from the flatness right out there at the point where you need it the most. Now, I'm going to, right off the bat, that's too long of a chisel for me. I find that a little bit awkward. If you have a large hand, you might appreciate it, but that's not what I would be looking for in a bench chisel in terms of the size. Okay, unbox the WoodRiver. By the way, the WoodRiver comes in at $40 and the Narex comes in at $35, so there's a $5 difference. I also forgot to mention that the Rockwell hardness on the Narex is 62. Now, this one comes, this is a socket chisel, so it's a two-piece. The wood handle fits into a socket that you can take it apart. That is handy when it comes to actually preparing the back, just to keep all the water off of your handle. It too is chromium vanadium steel. It doesn't say anything about being cryogenically treated. It does have a primary bevel of 25 degrees. The Rockwell hardness is 58 to 63. All right, let's take it out and see. Plastic bag. It's got a, this is designed to be reusable. It's a silicone blade protector, so what you do is just squeeze it like that to put the blade up in. It actually does a pretty good job if you don't have other ways of storing your chisel. I'll take that off. Handle's made out of Babinga. Let's compare the difference. Yeah, it's not that much shorter, maybe ½ an inch. Now, there's a couple of things about this that you'll see that are different. So if you look at the back, the flat back stops right there, and you've got a little bit of what I would call a grace period of about ½ an inch before, if you are working this back on a stone, get the square end. So before you would actually make contact, maybe 3/8 of an inch before your stone would actually make contact with this part of the cone and elevate it. So you got a little bit of a buffer there. It has the bevel on the side, and again it runs from the tip all the way back, so no matter where you are along the length of the chisel, as you use it over the years, it's going to be effective. It's quite a bit thicker than the other chisel. It has a little flat landing right there, which again prevents you from grabbing hold of a knife edge. Feels comfortable, 25-degree primary bevel as we mentioned. Now if you want to loosen the handle, just wrap it like that. So that cone is the same shape as the end of the chisel, and to put it back on, you just put it on there and then give it a good whack. And of course it tightens up every time you hit it with the mallet. So there the two side by side. You can see the difference in the thickness of the blade, and I suspect we're going to notice that when you start pounding on it. That's quite a bit. I never expect a chisel manufacturer to send you the chisel with a pre-polished back. That's something that I prefer to do myself. I'm fussy about that. But what I do want is to have that back come to me as flat as possible, so that all I'm having to do is remove grinding scratches. If that thing is twisted and I got to go in and do a ton of work, that I'm not interested in that. So we're going to start using a Shapton 500 grit glass stone, and we'll just get some feel. I'm not going to show you the whole process, but we're going to do it. But we'll just stop at various intervals and just tell you how it's been going, and based on how much time it takes to move from one stone to the next, give you a better idea of how much work you can expect to do on either of these chisels. I'm starting this with Shapton's glass stone. It's 500 grit. I've used the Shapton lapping plate, so if you want the absolute best, that's what it is. So at this point I'm halfway to the edge. Now I'm at the edge. Now I just slowly work my way back. Light to moderate pressure. And this is what I would call middle speed. Now I'm going to guess and say that that's close to a minute. So I'm going to stop and wipe this off and have a quick look and see what we've got. So if I carefully examine that, scratch pattern seems to be somewhat uniform. I still have a rounded edge right here and over there, so I've got to get down deeper. But I also still have scratches from the factory, so that's going to take some more work. All right, I'm going to work this right through until I get to the point where I'm ready to go to the next stone. At that point, I'll stop and I'll show you how to determine that. Okay, now this is about the same amount of time using the WoodRiver. And by the way, I took the handle off, which is nice because it makes it a little bit lighter and you don't get the wood all covered in mud. So if I look at that, now the nice thing about this one is I don't have rounded over edges, so all I have to do is just get rid of the original scratches and I'm ready to go. But I can still see some out here at the end, and that I have to get rid of that. So initial observation is that they both seem to be quite flat out of the box. It's just a matter of getting rid of those grinding scratches. So I'll continue with this, and then again we'll stop and show you at the transition point. Okay, so about 5 minutes, maybe 6 of work. This is the WoodRiver, and the WoodRiver is done on the 500. When I say done, I mean the scratch pattern is consistent. It's almost more of a color change than anything else. There's no low spots, high spots. It was really nice and flat out of the box. Because I'm holding it on an angle like that, you can see all the scratches are 45 degrees. And I'm using some magnification to examine this, and that looks good. Now the Narex, and this is what was to be expected, same amount of time. I've got polished from there forward, which is plenty, but I still have a little bit of that radius right there on that side. So that's going to take another couple of minutes to get down through that if you want to be really fussy and have a nice perfect cutting corner. So another couple of minutes with the Narex and the 500, and then we'll move up and we're going to go to a 4,000. Okay, so this is the end of the 4,000 grit. So that's purpose is to remove the 500 grit scratches. And the Narex, at this point, it took twice as long on the 500 ultimately in order to get it to where we want it than the WoodRiver did. But both are finished up to 4,000. So now next move is I'm going to go to 8,000. 8,000 will get rid of the 4,000 scratches. Okay, so that is it for the 8,000. It was about 4 or 5 minutes on each one, so they were the same. That's the Narex. And that's the WoodRiver. Okay, so the final step is to go through and do the 16,000. Nice thing about this, you only have to do it once. Okay, this is the end of the polishing process. Suction. This is 16,000 grit. So this was about 10 minutes on each one. And there's the result. Same amount of time for both. So I'm going to rest the primary bevel, and it's easy to find on that stone. Keep my both hands. By the way, if you want to see a video on all the details of sharpening chisels, we'll leave a link below. We did a full-length video on that not long ago. Find your primary, come up a couple of degrees. Now on a narrow chisel, I find it easier if you just do little short forward and back strokes. If you try to do circles like that, a lot of times when you first start at it, you end up skewing the end. So little short strokes are easier to control. About 5 to 10 seconds of work is all it takes till you can turn a burr. Once you do, come over to the 16,000, and I'm essentially going to do the same thing, except after locating the primary bevel, I'll raise up a little bit higher so that I'm only touching the very leading edge. And anywhere from 5 to 10 seconds, short strokes, moving each time so as not to wear out one area. And then the final thing, turn this blade over, lay the back down first, pardon me, the heel, and then drop it down like that, and just a couple of seconds to remove any burr on the back. Okay, now I'll do the same thing with the Narex, and then we'll start the cutting test. First part of this test, we're going to use the chisel, both chisels, to pare a piece of northern white pine. Now, the softer the wood, the sharper the chisel has to be, or the fibers will actually crush instead of cutting. So I'm going to use this to demonstrate how sharp it is. Then we're going to come in here and we're going to chop halfway across the end of a piece of birch. And that would be, I would consider, a medium hardwood. Then we'll come back to the pine and see how well the edge held up in the birch based on how it performs in the pine. I'm also going to take this opportunity to evaluate how the chisel actually feels in your hand. If it's not comfortable, you're not going to want to use it. And I'll start off with the Narex. So I'm just going to come along the edge. If the chisel back is nice and flat, then you can go in there and do this and do it with great control. So that is nice and sharp. Now we'll do the same thing with the WoodRiver. Okay, now we'll do the chopping. I've got my marking gauge set for, probably about a 64th of an inch. And I'm just going to scribe a line across the end of that board, and that'll give the chisel somewhere to bite. Start off with the Narex. Go down about half the thickness. Now the first thing I notice with this is that blade is really thin, and you can feel that vibration in your hand, so I wouldn't consider that a plus. And we'll try the WoodRiver. That is noticeably stiffer. And one more. Okay. Now I'm just going to examine the edge real quick. You can take your fingernail carefully and run it this way across the end of the chisel, and if you feel any nicks, then you know the edge is broken down some. That one has, and this one actually I can see, same thing, that one has. Well, let's see what kind of effect it has now on the pine. So you can see that it tore a lot more than it did the first time. Same thing. Well, what's that tell us? I guess you get what you pay for. That still is serviceable on a piece of hardwood. And just to prove that, I'll come in and do the other end and see how that chops. So that's still cutting clean in the hardwood. Try the WoodRiver. And there's no difference between the two. So if you're going to deal strictly with pine or softwoods, then you're going to have to use your chisel just for that. If you're going to switch back and forth, you're going to have to do something about it, because that is not going to go in and cut that end grain of that pine cleanly. So $5 difference between them. I'm going to discount that and say that's not enough to make your purchasing decision. The way the backs came, the Narex definitely had more work. That buffing that they do before they ship it to you is a disadvantage. You've got extra work to do in order to get those edges nice and sharp. And when I say sharp, what I mean is you want to eliminate that radius so that you get a nice sharp corner out there. As far as edge retention, I think that was as close to being an even draw as you're going to find. Where the Narex falls down is in the thinness of the blade. If you're going to be chopping a lot of hardwoods, I think you've got a real big advantage going with the WoodRiver. It's much stiffer, feels better in the hand. There's an uncomfortable vibration when you're chopping with this one in hardwood just because of that thin blade. The shape is fine on both of them. You've got clearance on both sides for cutting dovetails. I don't think there's enough of a difference between a socket chisel and a tang to make a judgment call or to sway one way or the other. This one is definitely longer, not a lot. This one fits my hand a little bit better. In fact, I need to mention this because I didn't earlier, is I actually worked for Woodcraft at one time and helping them develop their tools, and I think I may have even had some input into the shape of that chisel handle, but other than that, it wasn't a whole lot. And I do sell them in Canada, so I'm probably going to favor the WoodRiver, but I think based on the actual performance that the little bit that we did today, I would say that the WoodRiver edges out the Narex by about that amount. But I don't think you're going to go terribly wrong in either direction. But I will say it one more time. The thin chisel is a disadvantage, especially in dealing with hardwoods. If you enjoy my method of work and like my style of teaching, click on any one of these videos to help take your woodworking to the next level. Now, I've always said, better tools make the job so much easier. If you click on the icon with the plane and the chisel, it'll take you to our website, introduce you to all of our tools that we actually manufacture right here, as well as our workshops, both in person and online. Good luck.